It's okay.
Okay.
And okay, hi everybody. Good afternoon. I would like to express my gratitude with the UTCD's program since I spent there some months in 2010 as visiting scholar, and particularly to Marianne Schmink, who contributed to do my stay one full of learnings. Also, I'm thankful to the Tropilunch organizers for making possible this presentation. The study about incomes between the Tacana communities is part of a broader effort of planning and systematizing the Tacana experiences about territorial indigenous management that was led by the Tacana Indigenous Council and WCS. The technical staff was formed by me, Cantu Talara, and Telma Solares of the WCS. Our Madidi landscape director, Robert Wallace, contributed to the study with valuable feedbacks and also reviewing this presentation. Next, please. The presentation will consider four aspects of the study: forward and objectives, conceptual approach and methods, the results, and also the conclusions. Next, please. The Tacana TCO is located in North Department of La Paz, in the Bolivian Amazon. There live 20 indigenous communities with 3,773 inhabitants and 486 households. Represented by the Tacana Indigenous Council, they start to demand the recognition of their land's rights in 1997, over 769,800 hectares. After a complicated agrarian process, until 2008, they were recognized with 389,000 hectares. Next, please. Since 2000, the Tacana Indigenous Council, CIPTA, and WCS subscribed an agreement to work together towards the Tacana Territorial Indigenous Management. After more than a decade of financial and technical assistance, it is possible to identify 10 steps that CIPTA and WCS have developed to achieve one of the most successful experiences in indigenous territorial management. Next, please. These processes or steps are: 1, territorial rights recognition; 2, organization and leadership strengthening; territorial indigenous management plans; zoning processes; self-regulation; specific natural resource management; territorial control and surveillance; capacity building for administration; sustainable funding mechanisms; capacity building for monitoring and research. Next, please. The study's objective is to contribute to a monitoring system for the Tacana Indigenous Territorial Management Plan. Next, please. In this part, I will present the theoretical approaches that have oriented our study and also the methods we have applied. Next, please. As a first approach, we considered that indigenous territorial management, particularly in the Amazon basin, must be understood not only as an instrument for management, but also as a theoretical approach. The diversity of ecosystems, species, and their uses is inherent to this approach. In consequence, for a study about economic incomes, we have to identify the different sources of incomes, and each one must receive the same attention and procedure. As a second approach, following the anthropological economy, we considered that indigenous economic systems are formed by two equally important spheres: the sphere of reciprocity and the sphere of the market. In terms of the incomes study, we considered all the products and resources tended to self-consumption gifts and non-monetary exchange, and also the unpaid force of labor as part of the sphere of reciprocity. On the other hand, we consider all products and resources distinct to sale as part of the market sphere. The third approach was about social equity, applying the Gini's coefficient for the total incomes and consume, also looking for establishing gender gaps in the economic sphere. Next, please. Combining traditional and participative methods, at first we designed a questionnaire to ask about all the economic activities to establish production, incomes, and costs. In workshops in each community, in a participative way, we established a stratified sample of 30% of Tacana's households, selected randomly in each of 18 communities. Next, please. The household income questionnaire was applied to 153 households during the years of 2009 to 2010 and between 2011 and 2012. Incomes and costs were reported for 1 year. Prices of products and resources intended for self-consumption, gifts and non-monetary exchanges, sphere of reciprocity, were determined on the basis of average market prices reported for the same products and resources, or prices established by the Bolivian Consumer Index prices. Next, please. So, talking about the results. Next, please. For this study, we identified 12 income sources: agriculture, livestock breeding, which include cows, chickens, and pigs, hunting, fishing, agricultural byproducts and handicrafts making, native bees honey production, timber production and firewood harvesting, non-timber forestry product harvesting, like as wild cacao beans and others, tourism, sale of workers, labor power or work as employees, business that include hotels, restaurants, stores, etc., and 12 other incomes like as rents, bonuses, remittances, etc. Next, please. As can be seen, almost all the households are involved in livestock breeding. It includes bovine animals, but the majority of the households breed chickens. Agriculture is the second more widespread activity among the Tacana household. Harvesting of non-timber products include a wide variety of sub-activities. Other annual incomes are widespread as an income source due to the governmental bonuses, especially for the students. Business and tourism are not so widespread among the Tacana's household because they are relatively new activities for them. Next, please. In 2012, the average annual net income per household was $3,349. Employment or sale of workers' labor contributed with almost 24%, followed by timber production and firewood harvesting with 20%. Hunting and fishing together contributed almost with 30% of the net incomes. Although agriculture is widespread activity among the Tacana households, the contribution to the net income is not significant due to high labor costs. Next, please. As I mentioned, since 2000, the Tacana started a new form of territorial management based on management plans on different kinds of resources. Some of them were the timber and non-timber products management and tourism. These activities contributed with more than 14% of the household net incomes. Next, please. The average annual gross income per household reached $5,055 American dollars, and the average annual cost of producing these incomes were $1,705. What is important to notice here is that in terms of the gross incomes, 40% were non-monetary incomes and 60% were monetary. However, in terms of the cost of production, 67% were non-monetary costs and only 33% were monetary. The most important non-monetary cost was the family and communal unpaid labor. Next, please. The analysis of the composition of the different sources of income between non-monetary and monetary incomes shows that particularly hunting and agriculture generate mostly non-monetary incomes, but obviously businesses employ or sale of labor and tourism generate only monetary incomes. Next, please. Knowing that this kind of classification is quite gross but useful to our purpose, we classified the economic activities in three types. Activities that depend on well-conserved ecosystems, like as hunting, fishing, byproducts and handicrafts production, native bees honey production, timber and non-timber production, and tourism, that contribute 44% of the annual gross income. Activities that don't depend on the ecosystems, they were considered labor of others, business and other incomes, that contributed with 53%. Activities that induce the change land use, there we considered agriculture and cattle breeding, that contribute 23% of the gross income. By this way, we can suggest that the contribution of conservation to the non-monetary and monetary incomes is more than 40%. Next, please. In the 1980s, in the Tacana Territory, a road was constructed to connect the towns of Sao Buenaventura and Ixllamas. 11 communities live along the road, and 8 communities live along the river. The incomes distribution between these two kinds of communities shows that the communities living along the river received 8% more net incomes than the communities living along the road. The most significant difference in terms of income sources is fishing in favor of the riverine communities, but the sale of labor income is most significant for communities along the road. Whilst fishing is more important for the communities along the river, hunting still is for the communities along the road. Next, please. Gini's coefficient shows that in terms of income, the Tacana society is still quite egalitarian, even more in terms of the consumption or household expenditures. This analysis also shows that the more market-integrated activities generate higher income concentration than activities whose income's composition between monetary and non-monetary are mostly non-monetary. Next, please. As in other countries, the Bolivian Institute for Statistics established for 2012 the following criteria for poverty incidence. People who earn until 241 pesos Bolivianos is considered in extreme poverty. Between 241 and 423 pesos Bolivianos could be considered moderate poor, and people living with more than 423 pesos Bolivianos per month could be considered above the poverty line. Taking in account these criteria, when monetary and non-monetary incomes are considered, only 70.6% of the Tacana household live in extreme poverty, and 63.4% could be considered living over the poverty line. However, considering only monetary gross incomes, the proportions are clearly opposed to the first image. Under this method, 60% of the Tacana households appears in extreme poverty, and only 25% appears above the line of poverty. In 2009, the World Bank established for the Bolivian rural area that more than 60% of the population was living under the poverty line. And for 2012, the same source considered that more than 40% of the people in the Bolivian rural area was living in extreme poverty. Next, please. Fortunately, in 2000, CITA and WCS applied a similar questionnaire, collecting information about household income. The comparison of gross income between 2000 and 2012 shows that with the titling and managing their territory and natural resources, the Tacana increased in 94% their annual gross income per household and 107% the per capita monthly income. For 2012, the World Bank established that people living on less than $1.25 per day are considered extremely poor. The World Bank considers only monetary income. The rate of the Tacana in the same year shows an average of $1.8 per capita per day, including non-monetary and monetary incomes. Next, please. Having included in the questionnaire questions about daily wage prices by source of incomes for male and female workers, we could establish that women were paid 10% less than men. The more inequitable activities were livestock breeding, timber production, and business. For some activities were not report labor prices. Next, please. Through reporting of the number of days of women and men working annually in the different activities and considering daily wages prices, we could establish that women contribute in 40% to generate incomes for the households, without taking in account the activities of care, mostly on women's charge. If we counted the difference in labor price for women, it could be suggested that women contribute with 50% to the household income. The activities that mostly involved women were agriculture, byproducts and handicrafts production, and livestock breeding, especially chicken breeding. Timber and non-timber production and hunting are activities where mostly men participate. Next, please. As a conclusion, we can say that for Amazon indigenous people, the diversity of ecosystem and species is fundamental. Studies about economic incomes must consider the broad array of income sources. Considering non-monetary and monetary incomes allows a better comprehension of indigenous economies, demonstrate the importance of conservation actions for household incomes, and provide a different perspectives of poverty. Next, please. Gender approach allows identification of gender gaps in labor prices for different kind of economic activities and make women's contribution to household economics visible. Tithing territories for indigenous people and improving natural resource management contributes significantly to reducing poverty and conserving ecosystems. Next, please. And I think that's all, and thank you very much. So I can wait for some questions.